Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Naruto befriended Kurama early. After a life-changing event, Naruto meets Kurama early and they become partners and even good friends. With a better outlook on life, he meets many who want to join him and help achieve their dreams and goals together. Among those friends are many beautiful women. Realize just how important he is to them. Before we start, thank you for all of the support. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like. You can suggest a Naruto fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Warning. This story will contain mature language, sexual themes, and graphic depictions of violence and gore. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or any of its characters. Chapter 2. The beginning of a beautiful friendship. Nighttime in Konohagakure. Sometime later, Uzumaki Naruto, 8 years old, was taking a leisurely walk through the quiet walkways of the clan's district, admiring the beautiful full moon in all its glory on this night. He was heading home to his crappy apartment from the Nara compound, the residence of one of his close friends, Nara Shikamaru. He had been invited over for dinner with the Naras and to play several shogi matches afterward with the pineapple-haired young heir. The blonde found it hilarious to see his incredibly lazy friend, a bona fide genius, be both fascinated and frustrated by his unconventional tactics, even though he ended up losing each match anyway. He considered it a victory on his part if he forced the pineapple-haired lazy ass to take his famous thinking pose, in which he sat still with eyes closed and his hands together in an odd gesture, during the match. Smiling fondly at the memory of Shikamaru, Naruto wondered how he managed to turn his life around quickly and made friends so soon after that fateful night. Despite Inoichi's best efforts, he still remembered everything, every drop of spraying blood, the sound of his wrist tearing open with the jagged blade of the rusty and discarded kunai he found in an alley, and his surrogate grandfather crying over his bloodied body. He had no idea how, but he knew as soon as he woke up that the memories planted in his head were fakes and the real ones remained. The fake events were just foreign objects in his mind that he recognized immediately. Naruto could have thrown a huge fit with the Hokage for messing with his head, but he understood why upon seeing his surrogate grandfather's anxious face. The third simply wanted the young boy to be well and happier. He then did a better acting job than the Hokage ever did to assuage the old man's fears about his mental state. After the third left the room, Naruto then spent all day in the hospital bed thinking about what happened the night before, and decided to push down the pain and loneliness just a while longer for his surrogate grandfather's sake. The crushing depression he felt about what he attempted didn't make that decision easy, though. He wondered how to even begin, and it wasn't long until he remembered the tall and blonde ponytailed man he saw in his fake memories. It was soon after he was released that he ran into the same man around the village and found his name to be Yamanaka Inoichi. He was then quickly introduced to the man's daughter. Yamanaka Ino became quite important to him quickly. In fact, he honestly thought he would have gone back to try to finish the job for the final time if he hadn't met her just in time. It also probably helped his fragile mental state at that time that he developed a small crush on her because he enjoyed her genuine cheerfulness and playful nature compared to the fake smiles he used to display in the past. They became fast friends and he was introduced soon after to Shikamaru and the eternally jolly, as long as the word fat wasn't heard, Akamichi Choji. The four of them got along great even though they annoyed each other with Ino's bossiness, Shikamaru's laziness, Choji's over-the-top gentleness, and Naruto's pranks. He remembered being scared out of his wits when he was first invited over for dinner with the three clans when they gathered for their bi-monthly dinner party. After some prodding from his friends, and Ino's use of force, he finally relented to the invitation. To say it was an eye-opening experience to eat dinner with other friendly people was as much an understatement as saying one Hitaki Kakashi liked porn a tiny bit. Naruto's social ineptness, especially his poor table manners, endeared him to the clans, and they took it upon themselves to beat some etiquettes and common senses about society into him whenever he came for over with any of his friends. Yamanaka matriarch Kana and Nara matriarch Yoshino especially made sure he was well educated, much to his hidden chagrin. Choji's clan at least made sure he was well fed. Thanks to their hard work, he turned out to be a genuinely bright and friendly individual who had no issue with anyone as long as they didn't cause him any trouble. In the years since meeting those three kids and their clans, the blonde's quality of life improved considerably and he found himself genuinely happy these days, despite still enduring the hatred of most of the village. Despite all that, it still took him a long time to truly pull himself out of the depression and guilt that came with trying to take his own life. But he felt lately that part of his life was finally over, and he could say that awful memory was just that, a memory, and he honestly could not imagine why he even considered it in the first place. To think, all it took was a curious girl declaring, "Let's play," to pull him from the very edge of the abyss. Pulling himself out of his thoughts, Naruto noticed he was near the Hyuga compound and gulped loudly. He never liked the entrance guard's white pupil-less eyes following his every movement as he walked past, stony expressions seemingly forever chiseled onto their faces. He wondered if the cute girl he met earlier in the year lived inside this compound. 3 months ago Naruto grunted loudly as he found himself tackled to the dusty ground of the neighborhood playground by an overenthusiastic Ino as she made to tag him. "Ow. Take it easy on me, Ino-chan. Where in the rules did it say it was okay for you to tackle someone in the middle of a simple game of tag?" he yelled from under his friend's weight. Ino smirked as she stood and smoothed over her shoulder-length platinum blonde hair to make it less disheveled. She was wearing a purple t-shirt with white capris. "Where in the rules did it say it wasn't allowed?" she shot back impishly as she lightly dusted herself off. Naruto had no retort for that and resorted to annoyed murmurings about new rule forbidding Ino-chan from ever playing. His fellow blonde just giggled cutely before she noticed the time, and it was getting late. "Naruto, I have to get home to help mommy out. You gonna be okay?" She got a bright smile and a nod from the blonde prankster, and then left after a quick hug goodbye. When she disappeared, Naruto let out a sigh with a small blush as he remained unable to contemplate just what the cute blonde girl was to him exactly. He knew they were friends for certain, but he also felt slightly closer to her than he was with their two male friends. He hoped he'd get answers one day, if they ever came. "I guess I'll go home and treat myself to some ramen cups." "Wait, that's not so bad," he exclaimed with a picture of a ramen cup in each eye and drool coming out a corner of his mouth as he realized this lucky development. Before he left the playground though, he heard scuffling in the bushes nearby. Curious, he decided to check out the disturbance and stepped carefully into the bushes. As he got closer, he heard several boys' boisterous voices and a whisper-quiet girl's frightened voice. Forcing his way through the leaves, he stumbled upon a group of 3 boys ganging up on a small and timid girl with short indigo hair. He saw that she was wearing a simple black training outfit and was quite cute, but what his eyes quickly locked onto were her beautiful white eyes tinted with a hint of lavender. They were wide and trembling with fear. All of her would-be bullies turned to the new annoyance. "What? Don't bother us and beat it, shrimp. Or just asking this prissy Hyuga why she thought her clan is superior over the rest of us." The largest of the 3 boys tried to dismiss Naruto with a lazy wave. The blonde would have none of that and he sure as hell wasn't going to take having his height be made fun of. He let out a battle cry and launched into the group, smashing a fist into the nose of the apparent leader. A few minutes later found poor Naruto bruised and winded as he laid spread eagle on the ground with the bullies, having grown bored with him and the still untouched Hyuga girl, leaving to find something better to do. The timid girl stared at the heaving form of her blonde savior in wonder for a moment, and gathered the courage to speak up. "Anyo, I'm sorry you had to jump in. It's because I'm weak." The girl forced her words out in a tiny and stuttering voice Naruto had to strain to hear. After a moment of catching his breath, the boy slowly rose to his feet and dusted himself off a little bit. After another moment of tense silence, he finally spoke up. "Don't worry, strong or weak, I won't stand for seeing someone hurt if I can help it," he declared with a foxy grin and a raised fist. The girl's cheeks reddened considerably upon seeing the grin. She wanted to know more about this boy, but before she could introduce herself, "Milady. It is time to return." A deep male voice echoed throughout the forest. The girl's pale eyes widened before she reluctantly bowed and left. Naruto shrugged this off and began making his way home once again, wondering about that girl. He thought she was as cute as Ino, and seemed very nice if not a little weird. It wasn't long before he forgot about the incident thanks to the power of ramen. Present Naruto made it past the 2 Hyugas guarding the main gate and was walking along one of the compound's long perimeter walls. He realized it was already almost midnight according to the bright full moon overhead. Wow, that last shogi match took longer than I expected. As he walked in silence, he heard scraping of feet on a rough surface, likely roof tiles, but it was barely there. He doubted any other human could have heard this without chakra enhancement. He learned one day that he was blessed with heightened senses compared to other people because he was always the first to sense anything long before others noticed. He just never realized this until he was finally spending time with his peers and noticed his senses weren't exactly the norm. He also discovered at the same time that his sense of smell was about as good as a normal dog's, which he made use of this moment with a breeze blowing over him from the compound. He sniffed the air deeply and caught a slight hint of lavender. Was that a fresh shampoo scent? Naruto narrowed his blue eyes as he scanned his surroundings. The scraping and scuffling sound was getting closer, likely from the other side of the wall. Deciding to follow his instincts, he pressed his back up flat against the compound wall to try to blend into the shadow it was casting from the moonlight. The scent of lavender became stronger as the scuffling got closer. Then it all fell silent. A long minute of waiting followed with thick and stuffy tension filling the night air as Naruto rapidly shifted his eyes right and left down the length of the wall on either side. Finally, he heard a light thump as a pair of feet carefully landed onto the street from the top of the wall, and it was like an explosive tag going off right next to him since he was concentrating so hard on his hearing. He held back a pained gasp and an impulse to jump in surprise as he snapped his head to his right and glimpsed a tall figure clad entirely in a black stealth outfit. His body shifted into a ready state as his eyes searched the figure and zeroed in on a small bundle in the figure's left arm. He noted right away that it was a little girl in a white nightgown, and she was tied up tightly and gagged. Her lavender-tinted eyes were wide open with helpless terror. Few minutes ago in Hinata's bedroom, Hyuga Hinata was glad for this kind of day, a day in which the entire clan was busy entertaining a diplomat from the land of lightning's Kumogakure. Earlier in the day, the diplomat signed a tentative peace agreement with Konohagakure to help each other in certain aspects like aids, sharing some missions, and making some military concessions. That kind of dinner event kept the clan busy with preparations. A busy clan then would not harass Hinata as much, so she relished these days, which were still too few and far in between for her liking. The only things she had to worry about this day were to dress up formally, keep silent, and be composed at the large dining table, and that was it. After she took her bath with Hanabi, she put her younger sister to bed before slipping into her own futon. Her heavy eyelids began to droop with her last thoughts being of that blonde-haired boy with the gorgeous blue eyes, cute whisker marks, and that heart-stopping grin. The next moment, her pale eyes snapped wide open as she felt a rough hand cover her mouth and a sharp blade against her neck. She stared right up at the face of a large black-clad man and saw the clear message in his cold and dark eyes. Make a sound and you die. Her entire body froze at once and she couldn't breathe. So complete was her terror that she barely noticed being pulled out of her bed then tied up and gagged quickly. She only registered bits of the scenery changing as she was carried under the assailant's arm from her bedroom to the compound's rooftops, too terrified to think about anything. It was only when, upon landing on the walkway outside the compound, she locked eyes with a pair of striking blue eyes floating in the shadows by the wall nearby that she came to life. They widened in surprise and shone brightly in the moonlight, and she knew they were the same eyes she daydreamed about only a moment ago. Somehow, she felt her terror abiding, and unconsciously began to struggle. She fully realized now what was happening and decided she didn't want to be taken away from her father and sister, and would do anything to prevent that now. For some reason, she didn't want to just give up in front of these blue eyes. Naruto saw the girl begin to struggle after they locked eyes. He immediately recognized her as the indigo-haired girl he met 3 months ago and gritted his teeth. This was a bad situation and he knew he was no match for that black figure. He didn't smell a single trace of this man, a good sign of an experienced shinobi. He would die before he even got the first syllable out if he tried to alert someone, but he had to save that girl. Naruto would be the first out of anyone to know that if she disappeared, she would suffer greatly. Having been through so much already by now, he wasn't going to allow that to happen to someone else if he could help it. As he watched carefully from his hiding spot, he noticed the shinobi was growing frustrated with the girls struggling, and was getting quite distracted. This was his chance as he took a steady breath and reached for something he happened to glimpse lying on the ground by the wall. The black-clad man was growing irritated with the Hyuga girl struggling in his hold. Since when did she instantly grow a backbone? He gathered from observing his primary target at the dinner earlier tonight that she was a cowardly and submissive girl. He thought she was going to be the easier of the two Hyuga females to kidnap for his secret mission in an effort to acquire more Kekkei Genkei carriers for Kumogakure. His disguise as a diplomat was a ruse in order to study the security of the Hyuga compound up close so he could attempt the snatch after he returned to his hotel room. What would happen to the young girl and the shitstorm that had come when news of this got out, he didn't care. He was happy to serve the Raikage, and could almost taste the glory and fame that came with being the one to bring the famed Byakugan to his village. Whop. That was the last thought he had before he heard a loud fleshly smack and felt pure agony like no other, even in his long career as a shinobi, fill his entire body all at once. Pain so great he almost swallowed his tongue in shock. He barely noticed that this ungodly pain originated mostly from a certain pair of balls hanging between his legs. The last thing he saw before his eyes rolled up toward the top of his head was a long piece of stick wedged tightly between his legs. Why is it there? A young blonde boy almost had to wince in sympathy as he finished taking a full-strength swing with the long and thick stick that he found nearby into the man's completely unguarded family jewels from behind. The nin slowly sank to his knees with a strained groan as his arms instinctively reached for his prized treasure, dropping the tied-up Hyuga girl in the process. Naruto was waiting for this and caught her before she hit the ground. At that moment, they locked eyes again and he saw tears of relief and joy dribbling from the girl's beautiful eyes. He ripped the gag out of her mouth and she immediately buried her face into the boy's chest with happy cries of thanks. His cheeks warmed up at the praise and close contact. However, he had no time to think on this since the man would recover quickly. It's all right. I'll get help for you, the blonde assured as he used some effort to carry the tied-up girl as far as he could from the man, who was still in a quivering heap. He then inhaled in all the air his considerably large lungs were able to take. Oi! That guy in black's touching the pretty Hyuga girl in weird places. Could be heard echoing throughout the entire village of Konohagakure. In an unrelated matter, all fathers of young girls suddenly felt compelled to check in on their precious daughters at this time, just to be sure. Hinata was stunned into silence with mixed feelings about this. She was blushing at being called pretty, but she was also embarrassed by the possible misunderstandings about having been touched in weird places, whatever they were. Naruto only had to wait one whole second before he heard the thunderous crash of someone smashing through a solid wall. That was immediately followed by a man's loud and terrifying roar of pure primal rage from inside the compound walls. Where is my daughter? I will slaughter you like an animal. The entire compound lit up at once, and Naruto had to snicker. He figured something like this would happen after years of dealing with Ino's father and his overprotective nature. Apparently, this was something only a father and a daughter shared. With his sensitive hearing, he heard thundering footsteps zeroing on this location fast. Good, he and the girl should be able to get out of this uninjured. You goddamn brat. I'll kill you. Startled, Naruto quickly turned around and instinctively pushed the tied-up girl onto the ground behind him. He only had enough time to see the man in black standing on shaking legs, with one hand clearly wrapped around his abused nuts and the other outstretched in front, before he felt a small twinge in his chest and heard a wet squelch. He then heard the girl cry out in terror from behind. Why was she screaming like that? At that moment, a tall and enraged pale-eyed man with long straight black hair leapt over the wall and landed between the two children and the surprised black-clad man. If it wasn't for the seriousness of the situation, it would have been hilarious to see a man of high nobility standing barefoot and bare-chested on the walkway in his white silk pajama pants, shredded and dirtied by his alternative to using a door just a moment ago. Not to mention his wild and disheveled hair. The new arrival growled out wrathfully as he caught sight of the kidnapper. Before the black-clad man could get a word out, the Hyuga man snarled and charged at the assailant with his Byakugan blaring. In under a second he struck multiple times with fatal precision as all chakra-enhanced strikes were aimed at the forehead, throat, lungs, kidneys, and heart. It was all over so quickly when the black-clad man fell, already dead, into a broken heap with so much dark blood pooling underneath that the moon reflected off it easily. Naruto had to admire the way that powerful man quickly dealt with the kidnapper. This man also had to be the girl's father too, from the relief clearly displayed in his eyes upon seeing the girl safe and sound, if only tied up for the moment. Though the blonde couldn't understand why they changed to extreme alarm upon shifting their gaze to him. Before he could say anything in greeting, his head instantly became light, his eyelids felt heavy, and it felt like he was falling slowly to the right. He didn't understand this, he should have been perfectly all right. Was this why the girl behind him was still crying out in anguish? He watched rather than felt as his body hit the ground in slow motion. First with his right knee, then his hip followed by the shoulder, and finally his temple tapped against the cold pavement of the walkway. He couldn't fathom why he wasn't able to move his limbs anymore now. Finally, after a moment of panicked confusion, he used all his waning strength to glance down at his twining chest and finally found the cause. A small kunai was embedded into the very center of it, almost up to the handle, courtesy of the black-clad man before his brutal death. It was this damn thing. I need to pull it out, he thought, clearly going into total shock. But no matter what he tried, he couldn't muster the strength to move even a finger. He needed to remove this bothersome thing so the girl wouldn't have to cry any longer than necessary. His eyelids drooped even lower, despite his best efforts to keep them open. He felt himself being gently turned and laid on his back. He finally took a good look at the Hyuga man that moved him. He looked like a stern and stoic man. However, at this time, he could see clear concern in the man's pale eyes with the veins bulging around them. He also could hear the man's quickened breathing, apparently trying to work on his grievous injury. He also glimpsed the tear-streaked face of the cute Hyuga girl he just saved standing behind the man, apparently freed from her bindings now. Please, you need to stay alive. The pale-eyed girl cried out in anguish as her entire body trembled at the sight of so much blood gushing from the young blonde boy's chest. That was when it struck Naruto as his breathing became shallow and his throat began to flood with blood, making each labored breath that escaped sound like a wet gurgle. His wound was definitely fatal. There was no coming back from this one, he was sure. He didn't even feel anything as he watched the man quickly pull the kunai out with a wet snick, ripped his shirt off, and wadded it up to apply pressure to the gushing wound. The man then shouted something unintelligible at some far-off location, apparently addressing other people that must have arrived recently. Naruto's last sight was the heart-wrenching vision of the indigo-haired girl's tear-streaked and grief-stricken face, still desperately imploring for him to stay alive with her beautiful lavender-tinted eyes. His last thought came before total blackness took him. Damn it, I'm not coming back from this one, and this time I don't want to go. Talk about irony. I wanted to be able to grow up and protect my friends, but I guess I won't be able to do that now. At least I saved that cute girl. That was better than most people could do. Hinata and Hiyashi, get any of our physicians here now, and make haste. I want this child kept alive. Hiyashi shouted at the group of Hyugas gathering nearby as he kept the pressure on this child's gaping wound, with no trace of his usual composure present. Some of them obeyed and left in search of an available medic inside the compound. The others were reluctant. Hiyashi-sama, we shouldn't treat him. Don't you know who he is? We can finally get rid of this brat. An older Hyuga man was cut off as he choked under Hiyashi's impressive killing intent directed toward him. Finish that word and I will gladly have Hokage-sama execute you for breaking the law. This brat saved my daughter from being kidnapped and most likely a fate worse than death at the risk of his life. I owe it to him to keep him alive. Enough of your bullshit and be gone with your ineptitude. He roared at the trembling Hyugas, his Byakugan blaring with promise of a painful fate for anyone who dared to object further. Only his younger identical twin brother opted to step up to the boy's body in an effort to help him out. Brother, his blood flow is slowing down too quickly and his chakra network is fading. What can we do now? Hizashi spoke softly as he kneeled down and checked the boy over with his Byakugan. Hiyashi could only respond with a frustrated growl as he desperately tried to keep the boy alive even a second longer by increasing pressure on the wound. Hinata barely noticed her frantic father and uncle next to her as she continued to stare down at the blonde boy's still impaling form. She was completely numb inside as her tears stopped. She couldn't understand why this had to happen to someone as kind and brave as him. If she hadn't been so weak, this boy then wouldn't have had to sacrifice himself to save her worthless self. She stared down at her trembling hands. It felt like she had the boy's blood on them, even though they were perfectly clean. Before she could spiral lower into total despair, she heard an unnatural yelp of surprise each from her father and uncle. Before she could glance up to see what happened, she was yanked backward by her nightgown's collar, her father's blood-soaked hand clenching tightly onto it. Landing some distance away from the boy's body, all three were shocked to see bright red charka burst from the body and surround it as if it was protecting the boy. Hiyashi and Hizashi had to deactivate their Byakugan lest they became blinded by the dense and pure chakra radiating from the boy. They also had to resist the familiar and overpowering presence in the atmosphere as the other Hyugas scrambled to get away from the body as quickly as possible. The clan head heard his daughter cry out in shock. "Father, what is this? Is it hurting him?" Hinata exclaimed with none of her usual stutter, pulling hard at her father's death grip on her collar in an instinctive effort to protect her savior from whatever it was. Her father shushed harshly to get her to calm down a bit, and took a moment to stare at what was happening before them. He shared an astonished expression with Hizashi before replying. "No, it seems to be healing the wound as if it was nothing," he murmured in amazement as he observed the young child's gaping wound beginning to close. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Naruto opened his eyes to find himself lying on his back, submerged up to his ears in shallow water. He quickly sat up in confusion and clutched at his chest, only to see no sign of the wound he supposedly suffered, and his shirt somehow remained intact. He knew that was real, so why did he end up here suddenly unhurt? He had a look around and saw that he was in a long, wide, and dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch on forever into pitch-black darkness in either direction. The walls were old and crackling with large dark red and blue pipes snaking along them in odd patterns. He noted the red pipes were glowing bright red compared to the blue ones. What is this? Is this where people go when they die? Confused, he forced himself to rise and shake some of the excess water off. As he glanced at both directions the large hallway stretched into, he could feel something tugging at him a little one way. Having nothing else to go on, he decided to follow this sensation. After what seemed like hours of wading through the shallow water, the hallway suddenly opened up into an enormous room. Red and blue pipes covered nearly every inch of the walls on both sides and even the ceiling, but that wasn't what caught Naruto's attention, as he could now feel a very powerful presence in here. Walking further into the room revealed a giant set of iron bars blocking further progress into the darkness beyond. A closer inspection revealed a paper with "seal" written on it stuck high up on the center bar. He felt anxiety flowing through every single inch of his body. Something told him this was neither heaven nor hell. "You catch on quick, boy," a loud and authoritative voice boomed through the large cavern-like room. The young blonde yelped in surprise and fell back to land unceremoniously on his backside, splashing the shallow water everywhere. There was silence for a long moment before the booming voice broke into a mirthful chuckle, seemingly shaking the entire room with each exhalation. "Haha, it has been a while since I've had a good laugh. Please do not be frightened. We are in your mindscape and I wish to have a discussion with you, Uzumaki Naruto." The voice continued, rolling throughout the room like thunder. It took a moment for Naruto to regain his composure at hearing and feeling the presence beyond the iron bars. "Oh okay, but, may I ask for your name since you apparently know mine?" the young boy carefully inquired upon the mysterious presence. He heard what sounded like a pleased growl. "Respectful, I like that. I will tell you my true name soon, but for now, I'm afraid you know me by another." The darkness began to fade out and Naruto could easily make out a massive silhouette shaped like an animal towering high over him. He also noted, with some trepidation, many long tails swaying gently behind it. Two enormous crimson eyes shone brightly down at him in the darkness near the top of the silhouette. "The humans out there call me Kyuubi no Kitsune. The same nine-tailed demon fox that the fourth Hokage supposedly killed, with one exception." The darkness finally faded away completely, revealing an enormous crimson demonic-looking fox with rabbit-like ears and 9 tails. It was calmly lying on the floor and facing the boy directly with its arms crossed underneath its raised head. Its eyes were still staring down at him unblinkingly. "Instead, I was actually sealed within you when you were a newborn. I am the reason why you are hated by most of the ignorant idiots you've met so far in this ungrateful village." The now revealed Kyuubi finished softly as its 9 tails twitched and swayed around absent-mindedly. It was watching the boy intensely for any reaction. It took all Naruto had to keep from crapping his pants at the prospect of being face to face with the giant demon fox that the entire village feared and hated. Only reassured somewhat by the presence of the iron bars between the two, he regained his composure finally. As he gazed up at the fox, whom seemed to be waiting for what he would say, he had to take a moment and think about what to say to this powerful entity apparently trapped within him. He finally understood why the villagers hated him so much and, at first, he impulsively wanted to yell insults at the fox sitting beyond the bars for being the reason he lived a painful existence until recently. But, would that have changed anything? Whatever put the fox into him already happened, and he already lived through the worst of the villagers' anger and hatred. Plus, those same villagers were morons for even believing him to be the demon fox itself in the first place, so he had no reason to care about what they thought of him now or in the future. He could tell things would continue to improve for him as he made more friends at this rate. And what if it wasn't the fox's fault it had to be sealed into him? He already learned of one lie when all of his generation and younger were told the Kyuubi was actually killed. Right now, to him, it might not be such a bad thing having a giant entity sealed inside him. He probably got some benefits from that, right? And maybe he could make another friend in the process. At that thought, the Kyuubi's eyes widened fractionally for an instant. After taking a long moment to quell the shock of this revelation, Naruto decided there was nothing that could be done to change anything right now. He decided to ask some questions before forming an opinion about his recently discovered tenant. Thank you for not calling me a prisoner, and yes, you did get some benefits from having a giant entity sealed inside of you. The Kyuubi suddenly spoke, as if the boy's thoughts were said out loud. Naruto flinched in surprise at that, then remembered that he was in what the fox called his mindscape. It makes sense in this case. From those red pipes I see coming out from your side, you're kinda paying rent with some of your chakra, even if it was forced. The blonde replied sheepishly, pointing at the pipes lining the walls. The fox only gave a small grin, liking this human. He had a sharp mind being able to understand instantly what the pipes symbolized. So what happened that had me end up in here with you? The last thing I remember before coming here was a creepy man in black killing me for saving a girl. I certainly had no idea you've been in me all this time till now. Naruto asked, looking up at the giant fox with a cocked head. When you were dying, I pumped some of my chakra throughout your system and it increased your healing rate exponentially. While I'm working on that, I decided to pull you into this room so we can finally meet face to face and have a discussion. It spoke with an annoyed tone on the last word, as if it was going to confront the boy about something. Naruto gulped, having a feeling he knew what the Kyuubi was pissed about. As if to signify the changing mood, the fox's massive tails began to move around a little forcefully, splashing the shallow water everywhere. Now, I would like to tell you about my end in regards to how this seal works between us. As long as I am inside you, my chakra is absorbed little by little into your body and I cannot break out of the seal at any time without killing you. The fox explained while pointing at the paper seal on the bar with one of its tails. While I'd admit I'm not too put out by that notion, I realized it's best for me to work with you and keep you alive until the end of your life this time. The reason for this is the seal connecting us both is designed so that if you died for any reason aside from old age, I die as well and it probably would be long and painful, too. Naruto winced. The fox became more agitated as it narrowed its sinister crimson eyes at the cringing blonde, bared all of its teeth, got up on all four legs with thunderous footsteps, and its tails thrashed loudly behind it. They were raising a deafening racket in this large room. So imagine my rage when I watched you try to kill yourself 4 times in quick succession some time ago and I desperately worked my ass off to keep the both of us alive. Every god damn time. The all-powerful Kyuubi roared as it punctuated the last 5 words with an intense slam of one of its powerful tails onto the floor, shaking the entire room each time and causing large waves everywhere with the shallow water. The fox's angry roar knocked the boy off his feet and blew him back several meters to tumble through the choppy water. After the outburst, the fox exhaled loudly and seemed to calm down as it returned to lying down. Naruto, while a little wary this time, slowly stood up from the calming water and shook the excess off to face his tenant again while remaining silent with a guilty expression. The Kyuubi sighed slowly and a small smirk tugged at its black lips. You're lucky that I healed you on a whim this time. After what happened, I decided I wouldn't heal your moronic ass ever again as long as you kept contemplating suicide. That'd mean I'm trapped inside a weak container and I'd rather just die with you and deal with the hassle of coming back to life a few decades later. I almost considered not saving you this time since going up against an experienced shinobi the way you are now would be considered a form of suicide by many people, myself included. The Kyuubi grinned at Naruto's annoyed scowl at being called suicidal for doing what he thought was right. Still, you did do it to rescue that human child and you actually did not want to die, so I decided to interfere and make a deal with you. I want to help you get strong enough to keep the both of us alive, as well as protect all of your friends, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto became alarmed about the notion of making a deal with a demon, especially when it was the most powerful being in existence. He decided to make sense of something before he would decide to accept or not. Go ahead and ask your questions. The Kyuubi snickered at seeing the boy faceful at having his mind read again. Damn it. Anyway, I only have one question. Why did you attack Konoha? He asked firmly, before gulping a little as he saw the giant fox narrow its eyes angrily. Its tail shifted some as it took a deep and calming breath. Apparently it was a sore subject. A masked man with the Sharingan ripped me out of my previous container and put me under his control with that accursed Kekkei Genkai. I was then taken to your village and forced to rampage through it until your fourth Hokage came and sealed me into you, and that's how we got here. I should warn you that man apparently needed my power for something far beyond simply rampaging through some human village, at least before he was stopped and released his control over me just before I was resealed. He would likely return in the future to try and rip me out of you, and I don't need to tell you that, with this seal, would result in certain death for us, boy. The Kyuubi spoke with an angry undertone. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the prospect of being hunted in the future for what he contained. He decided to move on and worry about that later. That's all I need to know for now. I'm going to be fine with being your partner on this then. The Kyuubi was surprised at this boy's carefree attitude about making a deal with a demon, even though it wasn't really one, at least in the strictest sense of the term, in the first place. Aren't you going to ask what the terms were on this deal, at least? Fine, I'll listen to the terms. As long as none of them has you stepping out of me and going nuts on this village, they should be reasonable enough. Naruto replied as if he was wondering why they were wasting time on this. The Kyuubi rolled its eyes. I'll tell you anyway so you won't bitch at me in the future about anything that comes up. Now, your benefits in this partnership are that you receive all of my help in making you much more stronger like a container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune should be. That includes, but is not limited to, physical training, learning to control your chakra efficiently, receiving my fire affinity and several of my own personal fire jutsu, my knowledge of tactics and strategies, genjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and the ability to control your own tailed beast transformation after you've trained long enough. I will also help you with most of the genjutsu cast upon you by dispelling them with my own charka. If you begin now and work hard, you should be strong enough to get on even ground with the strongest people I've seen by the time you reach the age of 18. The Kyuubi had to hold back a smirk at seeing the boy's expression of wonder and amazement. I have 4 terms of my own in this partnership. First, you unlock all of your senses to me so I can see, hear, smell, taste, and feel whatever you come across in the outside world since it gets boring in here. A simple agreement between us is all the intent it should take for the seal to allow me to actively link up with you. Up until now, I could only find out things about you by reading your memories. We'd also now be able to speak to each other without you having to come here every time, and you also benefit by having your senses heightened even further thanks to my own senses merging with yours. Either of us can still cut the link for some privacy if needed. Why should I care about my privacy if I'm going to trust you? Believe me, when you get older, you'll want all the privacy you can get. The fox retorted with a snicker. The blonde just cocked his head in confusion, but shrugged. Sure. Let's agree to that. It sounds like a great help for us both. The Kyuubi grinned. So be it. We should be able to link up now. Indeed, they both felt something shift slightly in the air around them, as if some unknown force just responded to their conversation non-verbally just now. Next term, I would like for you to fix this mindscape so it isn't such a shithole to live in. It only takes a little bit of concentration to be able to change anything in this place with your mind, so I'll help you with that when we have time. This will help improve your training exponentially when you come in here to train your mind and chakra while your body rests at night. Naruto immediately responded with a sharp nod, having no objection to that. Third term, this one you may have difficulty accepting, but you must do this. It's for both our sake or the deal's off, is that understood? The fox spoke with a serious gaze, and Naruto gulped. The fox's expression suddenly switched from serious to clear amusement as it held 2 fingers up. You must limit your ramen intake to only 2 times a week. It said in a sing-song voice that did not match the rows of sharp teeth as it smiled, baring them all. Naruto facefaulted, clearly tricked by the serious atmosphere just a moment ago. The fox was enjoying the look of utter horror creeping up on its container's face at the prospect of actually having to eat his beloved ramen like a normal person should. What the hell was with that sudden change, fox? And why the hell do I have to cut down on the food of the gods? The fox once again bared its sharp teeth in a wide grin that looked purely demonic, and the boy involuntarily gulped. I may be viewed as a demon, but I am also based on a fox. It's my nature to enjoy jokes and tricks. You will provide plenty of entertainment by the way. The Kyuubi had to chuckle at Naruto's indignant, "Oi," before continuing. You should be glad I'm actually allowing you to eat any. This so-called food of the gods you love and trust so much is the primary reason you're a shrimp for your age. The fox spoke bluntly, holding its right hand up to show its pointer and thumb with very little space between them, as if to denote smallness. Naruto got a tick mark on his temple at the sight. I can help you craft a strong body from here in combination with your extreme physical training, but I can only do so much without proper nutrition. It was a good thing you still occasionally visit your friends for dinner lately aside from your 5 meals of ramen every day, otherwise you'd have been a malnourished prawn at this point. The fox finished with its pointer and thumb growing even closer together to punctuate the malnourished prawn insult. Naruto developed another tick mark, and had to take a minute to calm down. Damn it. I'll do it. I'll give up on that stuff if that's what it'll take for me to get strong enough to protect my friends. The blonde declared more for himself than for the fox in front of him as if to steel his nerves in face of that horrible reality. Very good. Before we move on, I forgot to mention that I'm female, and you may call me by my given name, which is Kurama. I just wanted to clear that up since I'm getting tired of you referring to me as it. The fox now named Kurama dropped this bombshell as casually as if she was talking about the weather. What? Was Naruto's intelligent reply as he stared up at her in shock. The great fox seemed to take offense to this. Is there a problem with the most powerful entity in the world being of female nature? Kurama slowly ground out as the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Naruto straightened up, sweat pouring buckets down his face. No, ma'am. It's just that, you have such a wonderfully deep voice, so that's why I was confused. The fox rolled her eyes with a sigh at the failed flattery. It's just the way I am. Do you expect a smaller version of me to pop out from some hidden curtain and say, pay no attention to the tiny fox behind the curtain? With a squeaky voice, she muttered in a sarcastic tone, then sighed again at the boy's totally lost expression. She waved her hand dismissively. Never mind, it was just an old expression I picked up many thousands of years ago. Moving on, Naruto, this is the last term of our partnership. When I think you're powerful enough and ready, I want you to go hunt down and kill the man who took control of me and made me attack your village. I doubt you have any issue with that considering he's responsible for everything that's happened to you since then. If you succeed in that, I promise I will be content living out the remainder of your lifespan within you, and I will swear not to have anything to do with Konoha and its allies when I get out. I just don't want to be sealed into another person. Kurama finished dictating her terms and awaited the boy's reply. Before that, there's something I need to say to you. Naruto finally spoke with a serious expression after thinking a long moment. The fox was wondering what he meant when her eyes widened at what she saw. The boy was now on his knees and hands, dunking his forehead into the water to touch the floor in a classic submission posture. Kurama, I am truly sorry for the time when I tried to take my own life. While I did not know you were sealed inside me at that time, it did not excuse the fact that I could have killed you as well. It was never my desire to drag anyone else into that. Also, I want to thank you too. You saved me. Because of that, I've been able to fix myself up enough to move on and work for a better life now. Naruto spoke in his most sincere tone possible. Kurama was so stunned by this display that she didn't say anything for a minute. She finally found her voice and growled with an annoyed expression. Get up from that pose and don't ever do it again. You are my container and partner, and you will not bow down that low in submission to anyone, not even to me. Is that understood? She growled out. However, her face settled into a more gentle expression as the boy picked himself off the ground. But, you're welcome and apology accepted. The blonde boy gave her a million-watt smile as he walked up close to the bars and stuck out his right hand out between them. Deal accepted. I expect you to work me hard, Kurama-sensei. And I expect you to do me proud as my container, Uzumaki Naruto. Kurama replied as she stuck one of her giant claws out to let the boy grip it on the very tip and they shook a little. After releasing and letting the comfortable silence settle in the air for a moment, the boy decided to say something that was on his mind. Did you do something with my memories back then? Apparently I was supposed to have these fake memories put into me so I would forget about what happened, but I knew right away and I still remembered everything anyway. The giant fox put a finger to her muzzle as she thought for a moment. I'm not quite sure about that. It may have been something to do with my chakra interfering with the effects of whatever that man with the long ponytail did to your mind. If that's the case, then, with my help, you could be immune to mental probing and torture. Another useful trait of our partnership, it seems. That got her a foxy grin from the boy. She then perked her head up and seemed to glance at something that Naruto clearly wasn't seeing. Now, I sense something is going on outside so you should be waking up soon. I'm done healing your wound and only a few minutes have passed out there. Be careful, as you'll be weakened for a while. We will speak more about this arrangement later when you're rested up, Naruto. See you later. See you then, the blonde container replied as his waving form began to fade out. Looking at the spot where he disappeared, Kurama had to let a toothy smile grow on her face. So that was your son, Kushina, he'll surprise me many times, I'm sure. Outside with the twins and Hinata a few minutes earlier Hisashi, and Hinata found themselves the only ones standing close to Naruto's body that was currently glowing, tinting the surrounding night air in crimson color. The others already ran away in terror screaming about a demon fox coming loose, their oh so important Hyuga pride and composure completely forgotten. The three Hyugas stayed rooted in place, staring transfixed at the beautiful but apparently deadly red chakra slowly whirling around the boy's body in a protective manner. Father, uncle, what is that? Hisashi noticed his daughter asked that with no fear in her voice. Only open curiosity. He also noted his brother stiffening uncomfortably. I am afraid I cannot tell you that, my daughter. It is a secret only this child can tell you himself. I recommend waiting on inquiring about this until you feel you have gained this boy's trust, that is if you wish to pursue a friendship with him. Hisashi replied softly as he still kept a firm hold on her shoulder, making sure she didn't get close to the body just yet. Now then, we must prepare to greet Hokage-sama. The clan head spoke as he and Hisashi turned around and Hinata reluctantly followed suit, a little confused. Her unasked question was answered immediately when the sight of the Hokage and 6 of his Anbu escorts jumping down onto the walkway from the air greeted them. The third's face was grim as he surveyed the scene from the broken body of the black-clad shinobi, to the 3 Hyugas, and finally to the crimson glowing body of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. What happened here? He asked calmly, but his tone did not hide his tension at seeing the Kyuubi's chakra floating around the boy's body. A few minutes of explanations brought everyone up to speed. They were also dismayed to discover the kidnapper, when one of the Anbu investigated his body, turned out to be the diplomat sent from Kumo. The Hokage rubbed his temples at the upcoming headache, as he'd have to deal with an international incident when word of this eventually reached Kumogakure. In the meantime, 3 of the Anbu were now standing guard in a triangle formation around Naruto as the crimson chakra continued to twirl around him. After a few minutes of anxious waiting, everyone noticed the red glow was beginning to fade away, and the chakra eventually shrank until it finally retreated fully into the boy's body. The Hokage and everyone else held their breaths for what seemed like eternity until they saw the boy stirring awake. The old man stepped closer until he was just out of the boy's range with his escorts tensing into readiness. Naruto-kun, is that you? Are you okay? Groaning, Naruto opened his eyes to see the very concerned face of his surrogate grandfather. Hokage Jiji, what are you doing here? He murmured tiredly. The third let out an explosive breath of relief as he discreetly signaled his Anbu to stand down. Only Naruto would call him that, and this was definitely the same boy he came to know and care for. He'd have to put off his discussion about the red chakra, at least until he was able to get alone with the boy soon. He noted the young Hyuga girl bravely stepping up. Anyo, what's your name? Hinata asked with barely any stuttering, surprising the twin brothers a little. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. It's nice to meet you. The boy replied with a tired and sheepish smile as he sat up. Well, Naruto-kun, my name is Hyuga Hinata and I want to thank you for rescuing me once again. I'm glad you do not seem to be hurt anymore now. Hinata quietly stated before she quickly reached in for a hug. It was all Naruto could do to not jump in surprise at being suddenly hugged by someone other than Ino and her mother. After getting used to it, he thought it felt very nice and warm. Hinata, on the other hand, was blushing scarlet at such an impulsive action. Both hid their slight disappointment upon letting go of each other. I would like to see you again soon when you recover, if that is permissible with my father. Hinata shyly stated as she glanced at her father. Hiyashi nodded slightly in approval before turning to his twin brother. Hizashi, please return to the compound and inform them that all is well. Take my daughter with you as well, and guard her and Hanabi until I return. Hiyashi requested of his younger brother. He got an affirmative nod in return and turned back to Hinata. My daughter, you should get back to check on your sister and Tomo-san. I am sure they are worried about you. Afterward, get cleaned up and await my return before you retire to bed. I will remain here for a moment longer. Hiyashi commanded of the little Hyuga, who quickly bowed her head to everyone and made her way back into the compound with her uncle. Hiyashi then kneeled down next to the tired boy. Uzumaki-san, my name is Hyuga Hiyashi and I am the head of my clan. I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to you for saving Hinata. You are welcome to come by the compound anytime my daughter wishes to meet with you. I also have to admit it was very clever of you on how you alerted us to the kidnapping. Hiyashi remarked with a slight twinkle in his eyes. Naruto had the decency to look sheepish. It was all I could think of. I've seen how protective parents are of their children, especially a father and his daughter. I had to get help as fast as possible, sir. Hiyashi nodded with a small but amused smirk before continuing. In addition, if you desire help with any situation, please come to me soon and we will discuss it. I will do my best to provide you with solutions. The Hyuga head spoke in his most sincere tone and bowed his head slightly. Naruto was caught unsure on what to do with this unexpected display from one of the most powerful and influential noblemen in the village. He almost flinched when Kurama's voice spoke quietly into his head. Naruto. It's me, Kurama. Do not speak, only think your responses when you're talking to me, okay? Respond to him with respect. Make sure to use the proper suffix and be modest. We're going to need his support in the future if we want our lives to be a bit easier, and it's important we secure it now. Gotcha. Naruto thought quickly, and took a moment as he considered his response. Hiyashi-sama, thank you for your generous offer. I just did what I had to do when I came across that guy, even if it hadn't been your daughter in his clutches. Anyone else would have done the same, I'm sure. Excellent response, Naruto. Nonsense, Uzumaki-san. You were there and that is all that matters now. My offer will always be available indefinitely. I shall be seeing you soon. Hiyashi smoothly replied with some admiration for Naruto's humbleness. He then stood up before inclining his head slightly. Have a good night and get some rest, Uzumaki-san. He added before moving over to the Hokage for a few words. Looks like we won his support. Don't do anything to screw that up. Besides, that female child will likely grow up to be a good mate to you in the future. Kurama murmured offhandedly. What's a mate? Naruto swore he heard the giant fox facefo in his head. Don't mind that for now, and I'll explain in the future. I keep forgetting you're just a young human child. Naruto thought about inquiring further about the term before he froze as he noticed someone's terrifying presence looming over him. He creaked his head robotically around and up to see his surrogate grandfather's peering face. The old man's gaze was deadly serious. The boy also noticed no one else were in sight around the two of them for some reason. Now, Naruto-kun, tell me what happened for you to have your apparently fatal wound miraculously healed by some crimson chakra. The third demanded in a tone that brooked no lie or half-truth. Naruto gulped loudly. Oi, what do I say, Kurama? Sorry kiddo, you're on your own with this one. That guy scares the shit out of me too. Good luck. The fox said quickly before signing off for the night. Oi. Don't leave me alone with the scary old man. Come back. Naruto screamed futilely in his head, before he slowly glanced up to the third again with growing dread. Well then, please speak, Naruto-kun. The third leaned in over him with a closed-eyes grin. However, behind the grin was a promise that unspeakable horrors would be brought down on Naruto if he did not satisfy the god of shinobi with his explanation. The blonde hero gulped loudly. So what did you guys think of Naruto's first meeting with our lovable fox? Like how Hinata's kidnapping played out in this chapter? Do you like the somewhat more mellowed out Hiashi? He'll still be strict, but I like the idea of him being actually a better father to the two girls than in canon. For the more detail-orientated of you guys, you will notice I did move the kidnapping incident from when Hinata was 3 in canon to when she's older in this chapter. That's the big change I planned for her, since I wanted her and Naruto to be actually friends early in their childhood instead of Hinata just watching over her crush throughout the academy years, and this seems natural in my opinion. She will still be shy and soft-spoken, but as you can see in her meeting Naruto, she's somewhat a bit bolder in rare moments, and that will increase from now on. As for what will happen with Hisashi, sadly that will go on as in canon in the next chapter. Poor Neji will still be hung up on his rage and fate and everything, but the target of his rage will actually be different this time. You'll find out for yourself. Now, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Appreciate any review you guys. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.